What just happened here?
Congresswoman, I would never lie to you fools. I mean humans. I mean fellow Earthlings.
Are you flirting with me, Mr. Zuckerberg?
I can see why you like her,
Oh,
Benefit.
it's data, sir.
She's a beautiful woman.
I have
I can imagine her running along a beach, waves crashing behind her. The
documents.
tropical sun gently browning her firm, toned rump. Her nipples hardening in the breeze as her bosom heaves. Her rump. Her rump.
Jesus, Mary and Joseph.
Her rump. Alexa, pick up. Hey, it's TV's Ken Jeong.
Sir, that's the president of China, Xi Jinping.
Hey, watch the racial slurs, pal. Hey, there he is, Mr. President. Nice outfit, by the way. Yeah, there was a ghost in here. Took all my clothes.
No.
So when are you gonna pay me the rest?
That is absolutely inappropriate and probably has some basis in reality. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. This is Luke Radowski of WeAreChange.org. A lot of very important news to get into, especially with the populist uprising in France that no one is hearing about, while there's a lot of concerning information surrounding our southern neighbor, Cuba, as violence is becoming more prevalent in that country, and there potentially could be a sinister motive to why we're hearing this protest promoted so much in the U.S. mainstream media. We're going to get into that plus a lot more, but before we do, the clip that we played in the beginning of this broadcast is part 2 of the Fresh Prez of DC by Kyle Dunningham. He definitely deserves a lot more subscribers than he has right now. The link to the full video will be down in the description below, and his videos are just as masterful as they are ridiculous, and of course not as ridiculous as the US mainstream media that is running headlines like this from The Economist that is criticizing the Italian team for being Italian, with the official Twitter page of The Economist writing that the, quote, most striking aspect of Italy's 26-man squad was that it did not include a single player considered as being of color. Actually, there's one which The Economist missed. They can't even get their basic facts straight, but just wait. Just wait until The Economist finds out about the NBA. I'm going to be waiting patiently for that very important update from The Economist. And we're reaching such an absurd level of reporting, I'm surprised that the color of lightning wasn't blamed for the destruction of a George Floyd mural in Toledo, which was hit by a lightning strike. Now, as the mainstream media focuses on just how absolutely horrible people are because of the way that they were born, and other more actual important news that's relevant to our existence on this planet, we are soon going to be dealing with a huge financial reckoning, as gas prices have already hit record highs, with demand surging and supply chains still being interrupted. All of this as there's the national employee shortage, as inflation is starting to rear its ugly government Federal Reserve created head, as inflation surged at its fastest rate in 13 years, hitting 5.4% in June. Not only the price of gas is skyrocketing, it's also everyday items like bacon, milk, oranges, all of them up dramatically, and all of them will continue to rise dramatically as the federal government plans on more direct intervention, which created this problem in the first place. Now, if you remember, from the early onset of the sickness last year, what I started to talk about was the larger economic consequences that will be a result of the larger government intervention in our economies. I said that this impact will be felt later down the line. It won't be imminent, but it will be profound. And especially when it comes to grocery shopping, I believe that profound impact is here, and it will only continue to escalate from here. Now, when the federal government is not busy hyperinflating the dollar, they're also very busy protecting, aiding, and abetting international traffickers of children, as of course they did with Jeffrey Epstein since the 1990s. Today, we are also finding out from the Miami Herald that it was government-connected lawyer Ken Starr that was one of the main actors behind the scenes that was, quote, launching a scorched earth campaign to persuade federal prosecutors to drop charges against Jeffrey Epstein, which they previously did before, and they gave him a sweetheart deal of a lifetime in a secret 2008 deal that essentially allowed Epstein to leave jail, continue to hurt children in unspeakable ways, and then go back to just sleep there. Thank you, Ken Starr, for being the fixer of a deal that ended up with more children getting hurt, who of course used his political connections as well as connections at the Justice Department to create such a travesty of injustice. In related travesty of injustice news, we have the latest announcement by the French President Emmanuel Macron, a former Rothschild banker, that he is essentially creating a form of martial law in his country if people wouldn't do a medical procedure that he wanted them to take and is essentially making mandatory in France. In response to that, French citizens have hit to the streets in massive numbers as they are protesting what is essentially a mandatory medical policy for everyone in that country. There was also massive rioting, a lot of civil unrest, of course, tear gas, clashes with police, highlighting a significant portion of the population that hit the streets in response to this draconian totalitarian measures by the French government. Now, I have a lot more to say about this and exactly what the French people are fighting against, but I'm going to have to talk about that on LukeUncensored.com. 50 cents a day. Helps and keeps an independent media journalist alive and well. And if you want exclusive videos with hidden information that actually play without buffering, LukeUncensored.com is the place to go. Also, another reminder for everyone attending our Survival Apocalypse Self-Defense Training course in real life in Manchester, New Hampshire. Make sure to check your emails. There are still few tickets available. It is not too late to sign up. Sign up now, especially if you want to have some fun and an adventure this coming Saturday in New England. Now, the situation in Cuba is absolutely perplexing on many levels. It's also very confusing, and we touched on it lightly just yesterday and had a lot of people responding. Now, again, we're not jumping on any kind of bandwagon here. It's important to understand here that this is an ongoing story and that there's many different layers to this. And even though we predominantly hear two different sides of the stories here, just like most of these stories, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Now, it is very interesting to see the U.S. mainstream media establishment kind of push against the Cuban government over atrocities that they themselves are committing in the United States, as major mainstream media elements have been pushing for censorship in the United States. And now those same media organizations are crying about how Cuba has blocked social media access to people in that country. It is absolutely ironic to see the mainstream media do this. It is duplicitous. It is hypocritical, especially with the severe amount of political speech that has been censored and blocked here in the United States. Some U.S. politicians' response to what's happening in Cuba has also been very perplexing, like the mainstream media's response to it, as we had the mayor of Miami suggest that the Biden administration should launch a military bombing campaign on Cuba, saying specifically that this was an option that needs to be discussed as a form of direct intervention to overthrow the current leadership. The Miami mayor specifically talked about the events in Kosovo in 1999, used it as an example of what the United States should be doing, and that is absolutely absurd and ridiculous. The Biden's administration to this has been also very duplicitous, as the head of Biden's Department of Homeland Security just issued a statement warning both Cubans and Haitians that they will not be allowed into the United States, and they will be stopped by American Coast Guard members if they try to flee the upheaval that is currently going on in that country. The Biden administration also announced that they're going to be setting up patrols looking out for, quote, would-be migrants coming from Cuba and Haiti. This is very interesting from the same administration that has essentially kept the southern border pretty much open, but is telling Cubans fleeing a socialistic government that they're not allowed in. There's a possibility that this policy is instituted because many Cubans fleeing from socialism usually don't like socialism. And the Biden administration is a more socialistic government. But also, very interestingly, the Biden administration also issued statements warning the Cuban government to, quote, refrain from using any kind of violence against protesters who have been accused of rioting. The communist state has responded with, now, as we're getting reports of police officers opening fire on, quote, peaceful protesters. There's also news of, quote, anti-government reporters being arrested, people being shot, people being beat, people being dragged away, and obviously top-down centralized governments always have been and will be totalitarian larger police states that by and large always try to squash any form of dissent. And there's allegations that this is happening right now in Cuba and also in France. And, legitimately, you do kind of have to ask yourself, why don't the protests and upheavals and civil unrest get as much attention in France as it is right now in Cuba? Well, obviously, the U.S. intel agencies have had a hard-on for Cuba for a very long time. There's a lot of history there. But some people are speculating that this could be a response to Cuba just announcing that they developed their first ever kind of medical procedure for the sickness last year. A medical procedure that is not financed and run by Big Pharma, but their own medical procedure with plans to sell it to Central and South America as a, quote, cheap alternative. Is this the reason that we're hearing about such upheaval right now in Cuba? Well, that right now is still unclear. We don't know for sure, but I think it's very fair to say that the mainstream media narrative that the people are protesting for a medical procedure is absolutely absurd and ridiculous, but this has been what the mainstream media has been running as a narrative, which shows you just how deceitful, controlling, manipulative liars that they could be. And with such lies espoused by the mainstream media, it really makes you wonder if there's an agenda happening here, especially now with 3 world leaders who have died in the last year who refused this Western medical procedure and didn't want to buy it from Big Pharma. The latest of which, of course, being the Haitian president that was just assassinated, with even some Colombian military command calling it a conspiracy. And what happened to the Haitian president is still a wider mystery, which points to, again, a larger conspiracy that happened here. Why did this happen? Why was he taken out? Well, let me know what you think down in the comment section below. I'm going to be talking about this issue a little bit more on Luke Uncensored, where I could talk about this a lot more freely, and I could get into topics that, of course, are too hot for YouTube to even have a real discussion about. But LukeUncensored.com. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you amazing human beings watching and sharing these videos. I love you guys. Stay tuned for more here on WeAreChange.org.